Well, good morning, everyone, and many thanks for tuning into our webinar, and a very warm welcome to our speakers from RT7Digital, Head of Client Service Management, Leanne Johnson-Robson, and Commercial Director, Jack Sweeney. Before I hand you over, not Jack Sweeney, I'm sorry, Jack Cooper, sorry, Jack. Before I hand you over to our speakers today, I'll just go through some housekeeping with you. To enable you to hear the presentation clearly, everyone apart from the speaker have been placed on mute and the event is being recorded. Following the presentation, there will be a Q&A session, and to enable you to put a question forward, please hover your cursor towards the bottom of the screen and a toolbar will appear, which includes the Q&A option. Select this, type your question in the box provided, and I will then pose your question at the end of the presentation. If you'd like your question to be anonymous, please tick the anonymous box and your name and company will not be disclosed. So enough from me. I will now pass you over to Leanne and Jack, who'll be providing hints and tips for the more experienced Amazon seller. So over to you, Leanne.
Great, thanks, Nicola. So I'll just briefly introduce RT7Digital. We are a full-service Amazon specialist agency, and we built our experience managing our own products on the channel, and we now work with over 50 brands across multiple Amazon regions. Now, in this webinar today, we're going to be covering a few key hot topics, we believe, that you would be very much interested in. One is global expansion. This will be relevant to both Vendor Central and Seller Central within the Amazon channel. Also looking at promotions and events targeted at both vendors and sellers. And then finally, Leanne's going to run us through exploring some key vendor tactics to carry you forward through the rest of 2021 and beyond. So over to you, Leanne.
Thanks, Jack. Right, so jumping right in, because as you can see, we've got quite a lot to get through today. We've split the global expansion piece into two pillars, the first being operations and logistics. I think, as we all know, the first step to selling on Amazon is being able to make your inventory available. So we'll cover off some of the key considerations within the operations space. And then I'll hand over to Jack to talk a bit about marketing considerations when expanding globally. So thanks to Brexit, what was previously relatively simplistic when expanding into Europe, VAT has now become a stumbling block for many businesses. Just so everyone is aware, we will share this deck afterwards. We have included some really useful Amazon links within the deck itself so that you can do some more reading. But basically what we wanted to cover off here is, first of all, in Europe, the new reasons which trigger VAT registration. For those who aren't aware, VAT registration is always required in Germany and France. But when it comes to the other regions, there are specific reasons such as importing, storing, selling to business customers is quite an important one, and then the distance selling and domestic selling thresholds that are in place. More information about these thresholds can be found in the Amazon VAT handbook, which is linked on this slide. Then when we think of expansion outside of only Europe from the UK and particularly the US, which is quite a popular destination, we do recommend that sellers consider doing the WABNE registration, which basically allows sellers to claim their tax in the UK and they don't actually have to go through the VAT registration process in the US. The other consideration for international selling is to enroll in the FBA export program. And what that basically entails is for your products to continue to be housed in your primary region, and Amazon exports it on your behalf as orders are received. So because inventory is not being housed elsewhere, there are no VAT requirements. It is important to note, though, that you do have almost no visibility on which countries Amazon is sending your inventory into. Sorry about that. Technical challenges. Then the other hot topic that has resulted from Brexit is the future of the European fulfillment network versus pan-EU FBA and what that landscape looks like now. So just a couple of key considerations here is whether you're doing EFN or pan-EU FBA, you will still have to split your inventory. So the UK has been completely removed from both programs. You will need to elect a primary marketplace somewhere in Europe and then either go the EFN route or the pan-EU route. The benefit of the European fulfillment network is because your inventory is not being housed in every country in Europe, there will be certain countries that you do not need to do VAT registration for. However, the fees for EFN are based on how far the inventory is needing to be shipped, and therefore we do see often that the EFN fees are somewhat higher than the pan-EU fees. And then just touching briefly on these three considerations. So not only does customs affect the US and other regions that you'd be looking to expand to, expansion into the EU does require meeting customs legislation now as well. So we do recommend, as does Amazon recommend, getting a customs consultant to guide you through this process if you have not had to deal with customs before. Then the other consideration is warehousing, and it goes hand in hand with shipping and fulfillment. So particularly when we look at long distance countries such as the US for expansion, need to think about if you're going to utilize a third-party warehousing solution or 3PL to support your activity in that country and then either fulfill direct to customer or have them support in fulfilling into Amazon. The alternative is to ship directly into an Amazon fulfillment center. However, what we often see is that the logistics and timelines around this make inventory management extremely challenging for sellers, particularly if they're looking at the regions like the US, Australia, Japan. I'm not going to go through these slides in too much detail, but just putting on the radar the tools that are available for sellers and vendors. Just covering off the global selling tool or build international listings tool that's available for sellers. What this tool fundamentally does is allow you to migrate your listings into any region that you've linked to your seller account. It does not mean not having to open a seller account in the regions you wish to trade in. You will still need to do that piece, but it does allow you to migrate your catalog without having to re-upload in those regions individually. It does offer a baseline of translation, although in our experience and feedback from many sellers in those local markets, the quality of translation is quite low. So we do recommend putting your content through a localization process, which is a service we offer, but there are also a lot of translation agencies available in the various markets. A couple of key things to note with this tool. As I mentioned, regional information will still be required for each region. The tool does not transfer A+ or store content. These will need to be manually translated and uploaded by the seller. Not all listings will be eligible for migration, which means that ineligible listings will need to be manually added to the target marketplace. The most common reason for listings not being eligible is either missing information or it's a product where there are different selling requirements in the region you're trying to migrate into. We see that more in the electronics and consumables space, but it's not exclusively for those. And then if you have got trade agreements in place with European resellers and you need certain products to be gated from certain countries, there is the option to upload exemption lists, which will block those ASINs from becoming available to sell from your account. And then moving on to global selling for vendors. So there is a global listing feature. Unfortunately, this is a regional feature, so it applies to the EU8 only. an application to sell for vendors can sometimes be requested via support for marketplaces that are not in Europe. But unfortunately, they do all operate in isolation. And in most instances, a vendor will need to wait for an invitation when it comes to the US or other regions to operate on Vendor. The benefit of using the global selling tool on a vendor account is it automatically creates local vendor central accounts. Because you are not the owner of the inventory. Amazon handles all of the other information, so there really is minimal setup required. The quality of translations is considered much higher when using this tool. And it is quite user-friendly in the sense that if there's any listings that are missing core information, unlike on the seller side where it will purely be marked ineligible, the system actually prompts you to complete the information in order to complete the process. As with on the seller side, the global listing does not transfer A+ content or stores. And then one thing that is really, really important for vendors to note is that once you opt in to make the inventory available in those regions, it is a non-reversible process. So you need to be completely sure that you do want to be selling in the European countries that you select before initiating this. Back to you, Jack.
Great, thanks, Leanne. So just a couple of points around the customer-facing element of Amazon, and especially the content. And we see this commonly across vendors as well when selling in multiple regions, especially in the EU and also across from the UK to the US, is localizing content for each region. And this has a sizable impact on the performance of the listings. In this slide here, I'm just highlighting an example of Sony doing this really well. As you can see, their content, this is their A+ content, has been across 2 regions here, has been translated, localized, also including relevant certifications that are recognized in each region. This is what will really drive your listings, your Amazon listings, to the next level when looking at key metrics such as conversion rate, for instance, and driving the most out of your spend when it comes to managing the AMS effectively as well. Now, this also applies within the advertising, and this is another, it may seem obvious, but something we commonly see is, there's no blanket approach that can be applied to the advertising on Amazon within the AMS. Keywords need to be targeted specific to each region. In Germany, German keywords need to be targeted and refined. Good tricks, if you don't have the relevant resource initially, is to use the autos, use the auto campaigns within the AMS to assist you and allow Amazon to provide you with recommendations around keywords of what's converting and what's not. Draw those out and look at it more from a data level rather than a specific keyword level, as it can sometimes be a bit of a stretch to have a full understanding of multiple languages to that level of depth initially. And finally, as well, create awareness outside of Amazon. There's a lot, in terms of brand awareness, you can generate a huge amount of brand awareness within Amazon, and there's metrics to back that, but also look at, running your own events, paid social campaigns as well. There's affiliate links, which you can drive you where you actually receive a percentage of the end customer purchase from your own website, which varies across category. But there's lots of different avenues that can be explored around creating that brand awareness off Amazon and driving traffic to the channel. The buying intent tends to be very high on Amazon. As you can see there, 92% of Amazon product searches result in end purchases. So this is something also to bear in mind when looking at your strategy.
So then just to put on everyone's radar some new functionality that has become available in case you aren't aware. It's called Amazon Attribution. And what this platform does is it finally allows Amazon sellers and vendors to track off Amazon marketing activity on Amazon. So if you need to gauge the impact of that activity, whether it's social, email, Google, you are able to actually see direct revenue generated from your activity on Amazon. So this really has filled a hole that has been a major frustration for advertisers for quite some time, because everybody wants to understand their return on investment, and that previously was extremely difficult when it came to Amazon. Then moving along to the promotions and events piece. So this again, we've just split into two topics, the first being promotions, and then the second one with Prime Day right on our heels now is a little bit about events. So first, when we look at promotions, we've split it out into what promotions are available for vendors versus sellers and what type of activity they are best for, and then some key considerations. As most vendors on the call will know, the key consideration when it comes to participating in any kind of promotional activity is the funding component and needing to fund that activity. However, we have seen that vendors typically get increased visibility on landing pages, particularly when it comes to lightning deals and best deals, and not only over major event periods, on an ongoing basis as well. The other benefit is actually the easy performance view. It may not give a lot of detail, but it's very clear to see through the promotion section exactly how many units have been sold during that promotion itself. On the seller side, you will see there is a lot more options available, particularly in the multi-buy and tier deal space. So what sellers have the option to do, for example, is have a buy one product, get 50% off a second product, or get a second product free, or buy one, buy two, buy three, buy four, and staggered deals. That kind of option is not currently available in Vendor, and there are no signs indicating at this stage that it will become available anytime soon. Those deals obviously great for cross and upsell. Your lightning deals being key for high visibility, although there are always deep discounts. And then the coupons and vouchers, we actually saw recently, Amazon is pushing these quite hard at the moment, and they do seem to be making the coupon messaging more prominent within the search results. Then an ongoing issue is always reporting for sellers in the promotion space. So there is now a predefined promotions report, which has been added to the FBA reports. However, it is quite limited in the fields that are available. The key drawback of this report is that you're only able to see the discount that was actually applied, so the value of the discount, but not what the product actually was or what the selling price was. It is at least a way to gauge some data on how effective the promotion was. For merchant fulfilled or seller fulfilled prime sellers, within the order reports, there is the option for customization, and within the customization, there is a promotions category that has been added within the optional columns. The great thing with this is that you get all of the data that you would ordinarily get in an order report, which includes what the product was and the selling price, but now you also get the promotional data alongside it. Jack?
Yeah, so just looking at Amazon events, initially there's a few things I wanted to run through here that we commonly see if we take Q4 for an example, which is a key trading period for many vendors and sellers. And firstly, budget management is obviously very important, and ensuring that you have the correct budget allocated across the months, but how you use that budget and utilize it effectively. What we find is that the research phase, when you're looking at around October, November, there's higher traffic researching keywords around what products they're going to purchase, but the purchase decisions aren't made during that time. And that's why it's really, really important to look at your AMS, your advertising strategy, and launch those campaigns at least 2 months prior to when you actually want them to be delivering to their optimum. And the reason being because Amazon will recognize those. There's a relevancy score attached to that so that you get the correct ad placements. And also the keywords as well. You want to be targeting the correct keywords and refine those keywords. When looking at FBA, as I'm sure any established sellers would know, there's much longer lead times when it comes to processing the FBA stock. So get that shipped in, end of September, probably at latest, to ensure that you have relevant levels of stock in place for the busy trading period. Commonly, time and time again, we see brands that have a high level of demand and just not the stock within FBA to meet that demand. And it's nothing that upsets us more than that kind of situation. So really key. Also looking at the product listings, ensure that you have them optimized well in advance. We're already thinking about Q4 for our clients, already preparing them for Q4 as well. Ensure you've got the correct keywords targeting, you're growing your organic ranking, and featuring on the relevant search terms high up within the organic search as well as the paid as well. Now, just to reiterate that, this puts some timelines in place. You can see just around Prime Day. I'm going to touch on Prime Day in a minute. It looks like it's going to be coming up very soon, where they changed the date of it last year. But you really can use these key dates to carry you through and fill the gaps between them as well. So there's a wider halo effect that you'll see if you prepare correctly for Prime Day, Black Friday, and the busy Q4 trading period. So there's the lead in time. You want to ensure that you're allocating budget to that, having correct advertising campaigns run prior to the date itself. And also on the lead out as well, you'll see a wider halo effect across your range and ensure that you continue delivering those campaigns and managing them to your target return. Just some data here around Prime Day last year, which is quite amazing to see. $3.5 billion in sales, but the savings I think is really key to know. And for those that Prime Day may not be suited to some brands as well, it's also important to look at your margin and make sure that it's a worthwhile investment from your end. But if you can see here that $1.4 billion in savings across that time and 1 million deals globally. So it's a huge day and a huge event. Now it looks like just some housekeeping really here, that it looks like it's going to be taking place in June this year. And that means we've actually only got 2 days for certain submissions. You can see here the discounts and vouchers are due in by the 28th of May. And you've also got the inventory is due in by the 6th of June for Prime Day. So there's definitely an element of urgency as this has been sprung upon us, that we are looking at Prime Day to be in place for June of this year.
Cool. And then last but not least, Fender Tactics. So this is, where things get really interesting. So just covering off a couple of key topics, starting with Born to Run, just a graphic here that Amazon has provided, just indicating how Born to Run works for those who may not be familiar. There are a lot of pros and cons to Born to Run. One thing to make everyone aware of, in case you weren't already, is that Born to Run is now a lot more accessible than it was in the past. So previously you needed to receive an invitation for participation. Vendors are now able to submit deals or ASINs for consideration in the program. Obviously, one of the biggest pros of this program is that it does initiate a first purchase order. And when launching new products in particular, that is the biggest challenge that most vendors experience, is getting the first purchase order. It does influence the demand forecast at an accelerated pace because normally it is a substantial order and there is quite a lot of pressure on the vendor to get the sales moving at an accelerated rate, and opportunity to receive additional POs and opportunity to gain reviews, which is obviously quite important. On that though, Vine has become more accessible for vendors as well. So there is a secondary opportunity within Vine for additional reviews. The biggest drawback with the Born to Run program is that you have got 90 days. Well, you must run AMS activity for a minimum of 90 days. So you have to submit the stock at a lower cost. And then you must support it with AMS activity as well. The other consideration is if you don't sell through the inventory, there are penalties that come with the balance of that stock. Then moving along to the pricing and negotiations piece. This again is a massive challenge that a lot of vendors experience, is particularly in Q1 when the terms come up for renegotiation. So we've just got a couple of tips and considerations here for the pricing and terms negotiations. The first is pricing parity across the web. So Amazon does scrape e-commerce sites and your own website to gauge what the selling price is out there for a product. So if you are putting forward cost prices and they can't establish whether or not they will actually receive a profit, those products will simply not be ordered. So it is really important to drive that pricing parity across the web, particularly if you're submitting a cost increase. There's also a direct relationship between your base accrual and your product costs. So if Amazon requests lower product costs in the negotiation and you do not meet these, they will increase the base accrual percentage that you need to pay. We do encourage vendors to push back to an extent on some of the negotiations, but it needs to be data driven. So we've got to be able to show Amazon that you're investing in the platform. So either through AMS activity or new product launches, options like Vine, Born to Run, basically showing growth and that you are in it for the long run with them. One key thing is to avoid 100% overstock allowance as far as possible. This is something Amazon pushes for. They are renowned for overstocking when it comes to vendors, and this puts a lot of risk on the vendor because this basically gives Amazon the right to return 100% of your stock at any point, and you will need to refund them. And then we also recommend avoiding the 90-day payment term unless your cash flow can definitely sustain this. Amazon is becoming more aggressive with early payment discounts. So this is not as prevalent as it used to be, but something to have on the radar. And then when we look at possible alternatives to lowering your cost of goods sold, so increasing your list price or having minimum advertised pricing in place is a consideration. Investment in AMS activity, as I mentioned, does show that you're invested in the platform. Consider direct fulfillment. So we will cover off direct fulfillment in a slide or two, but often what we see here is vendors can come away with better margins if they're able to shift to direct fulfillment and negotiate fulfillment fees with the carrier directly. So that can be a good option for some vendors. And then explore funding and merchandising options, and then the hybrid model, which we'll also be going into detail a bit more coming up. Third-party seller management, another hot topic. I think there's two key things that we want to highlight here. And the first is that Amazon is not on your side when it comes to this particular argument. They are customer-centric. They want the best price on the market, and whether that comes from yourselves, the brand owners, or a reseller is pretty immaterial to them. So they don't offer much in the way of support unless you are dealing with a counterfeiting situation, in which case that can be reported. We also believe that having third parties is not necessarily a bad thing, but it all comes down to control. So if your resellers are well controlled, it can actually boost the overall business revenue, but that control piece is key. So when it comes to managing the resellers, controlling your supply chain is key. And when we look at that, it's not just who you are selling to directly, it's also who your resellers are selling onto. And that's the big stumbling block for a lot of vendors, is losing control of the supply chain and not knowing where the seller on Amazon is actually sourcing their stock. Implementing minimum advertised pricing is highly recommended. This really goes a long way in fighting or preventing a price war on Amazon, and being very vocal with your retailers and wholesalers about your enforcement plan for that MAP pricing. And then restricting authorized sales channels. You'll note that along with the MAP clause, we have just put a little recommendation down there that you do this in conjunction with a legal advisor to ensure it's being done properly. But if you have major retailers and wholesalers with a strong presence on Amazon, we do recommend that you restrict their ability to list your products on Amazon. And then avoiding unlimited quantity, deep discounts and promotions. We often see after periods like Prime Day, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, resellers cropping up that have bought the inventory in bulk and are now in a position to undercut you in the long term. There are some tactics that we've seen vendors utilize with varying levels of success. So one consideration is the transparency program, brand gating, ASINs via brand registry, using different UPCs for Amazon selling. So this can be a good one if you have a lot of resellers and you want to be able to ring fence your listings to be your own stock only. Having different UPCs can work quite well here, but then you do compete against the other sellers who are simply on a different listing anyway. And then issuing of cease and desist letters. This is something that comes up a lot. Definitely varied levels of success here, but it is certainly a consideration. So the direct fulfillment program is something, as I said, that works for some vendors really well. One of the key benefits of direct fulfillment is the lower risk of being out of stock. So it takes the reliance on Amazon purchase orders away. And this also allows you to offer your full catalog, including new products, which, as we said, with the Born to Run, is often a challenge when it comes to Amazon. Obviously, the two key considerations that come with this, though, is operations. So being able to fulfill out of your own 3PL or warehouse, and then the cost component. So it needs to make sense for your business to be fulfilling directly as opposed to paying the fees to Amazon to fulfill. That we find ultimately is the decision maker when a business looks at direct fulfillment. And then just the last topic is the hybrid model. So this is something that is coming up quite a lot as a discussion point. And just to be clear, when we refer to the hybrid model, that is the management of both a vendor and a seller account alongside each other. The ultimate goal of having a hybrid model is to maximize profit. So some of the key considerations to keep at the forefront of your mind is there is obviously a lot more responsibility when it comes to the hybrid model because you're managing two accounts. And for those who are not familiar with the seller accounts, they do tend to be more hands-on than a vendor account. And particularly within the inventory management and customer service space. So you are responsible for your own inventory management in a seller account and your own customer service as well. A benefit of having the seller account is the enhanced promotional opportunities and the stock component, but I will go into some of the other benefits in a bit more detail in the next slide. Fundamentally, the cost structures are also very different. So as a vendor, you are working on a COGS basis. And as a third-party seller, the fees are deducted from the retail price. So you do need to have a look in quite a lot of detail around what your ultimate margins will be between the two platforms. There are a lot of benefits to the hybrid model, though, and some of the key ones we've listed here. First of all, it's influencing the vendor account by using the seller account. And the two key things that come with that influencing is influencing the demand forecast, showing Amazon that there is demand for the product, and that's coming through the seller account, and then influencing the pricing. So it gives you an opportunity to ensure that your manufacturer retail price is actually available on Amazon, and it does set a good benchmark on the listing. The other key benefits, as I mentioned, it reduces the risk of out of stock periods. And the reason why that is as soon as your vendor account runs out of stock, you're able to pick up those sales from the seller account, which ultimately feeds into the profit maximization conversation. Mitigating the impact of inconsistent purchase orders as with out of stock, and then reducing the risk of lower COGS requests and unprofitability or CRAP claims. And here we also recommend that vendors have a look at particular products that they may want to list on seller only. And those would be products that Amazon often highlights as unprofitable. It may be worthwhile for the vendor to list them exclusively through a seller account. Increased content control, this one is up for debate. We've kept it on here because it is still a factor. Vendors, as it stands through the retail contribution, can override seller content. However, Amazon is busy with a project in the US at the moment where the retail contribution is no longer overriding, and it will all boil down to brand registry, regardless of whether it's a vendor or a seller. So we've kept this here for now, but it is good to be aware that that is going to fall away in the coming months. And that is all from us.
Thank you. Many thanks, Leanne and Jack, for that presentation, loaded full of information. You'll be happy to know that we are recording it and sharing the deck with you. So if you've been frantically taking notes, we'll have something to refer to. So we've got some questions that have come in, so we'll just go through those. First question, is FBA export also available for vendors or a similar option?
No, so it's for sellers only, but vendors can authorize global selling through their accounts, and then Amazon will export on their behalf. It often comes up as the global store.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Where do I find the Amazon Attribution analytics?
So Amazon Attribution is housed within the Amazon advertising portal, and you can sign up through there.
Okay, thank you. This is quite a long question. So do you know why restock level has been thrown in and when it will be removed? Others in a similar situation to us have 1,000 of their restock limit. They remove 1,500 units to make space, only to find their restock limit is further reduced. How can I increase sales when I can't restock my key lines?
This is a hot topic at the moment. So there's one really important thing to note here, and it's affecting both sellers and vendors. At the moment, the fulfillment centers are under an immense amount of pressure, and they're actually battling to receive inventory. And so what we've seen on the vendor side is significantly lower purchase orders over the last 3 or 4 weeks. On the seller side, it's the restock limits. So for a seller, you are actually able to appeal to have your storage increased. There is an appeal process that you can initiate through support. So you simply open a ticket and they will ask you to complete a questionnaire. It is unlikely, unfortunately, that they will increase the capacity in this lead-in period to Prime Day, just simply because they have made it clear that they're holding space in the fulfillment centers ahead of Prime Day. So that may need to wait until after, but it is a problem being experienced across all accounts in the UK at the moment.
Do you know what the success rate, not taking Prime Day into account, but what the success rate is of being able to increase your space?
We are yet to see in the last week or two somebody's request being approved, unfortunately. Most of them are being declined, and the feedback that we have received more from the vendor side is because the focus is on Prime Day.
Prime Day, so you actually have a better chance after that, possibly, if they'll let you know. Okay.
And also for sellers, keeping their IPI score up as much as they can. Your IPI score is a distinct differentiator, and IPI scores over 500 are a lot more likely to have their appeal approved.
Right, okay. Another question. I understood that MAP was not legally enforceable in the UK and EU and could be seen as anti-consumer and frowned upon by Amazon.
Yeah, so that's where the legal advisor piece comes in. So unfortunately, we're not contract experts. It is something that Amazon has stated that they will consider, but the legalities of implementing that in the UK and Europe is something that you'd need to discuss with a legal advisor.
All right, okay. Well, that brings us to the end of our questions. Many thanks to you again, Leanne, and to Jack for your presentation. I'll be sharing the presentation and Jack's contact details with you all later today. So if you have any questions or you would like any further information, Jack will be happy to speak to you. Thank you for joining us this morning. Details of all our June webinars will be distributed later this week and can be found on the events page of the Beta website. So we hope to see you there, but in the meantime, do take care and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.